2 or 3. Maybe just 2.
Hey, Clayton, I think we're going to use that chair. I think it's
Are you okay?
3 people up there, yeah.
So guys, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to do probably about a 15, maybe 20-minute presentation, but then we're going to give you flash drives of the body cam footage and some audio that hasn't been released of the disciplinary hearing, and it provides some, a very poor rendition of why they did what they did. But we're trying to make everybody a copy of these flash drives so that you'll all have it. I don't know how many are going to need it, but we've got like 15 of them, I think, so I hope we have enough for you. If you don't, then anybody who doesn't get a flash drive, pull those to the side. We'll get your email, give you a Dropbox. We want to make sure that everybody has what they need. In addition, some of you may want other things, autopsy photographs, scene photographs. The scene photographs are not terribly interesting, but you know, there are other things that you want. Ask me, and we will try to provide you what we think we can. But we'll probably get started here in about 2 minutes.
There's still going to be 3 of you guys?
And it'll just be 2 of us. It'll be me and
okay.
It'll be me and Ms. Timpa, and I hope that Ms. Timpa will be able to endure this. She sometimes has not been able to sit through these things, but other times she has. But I intend to talk for a bit, show you some of the things that I think a lot of people already know, but there are probably some things that you don't know. But for some of you folks, this is all new. And you know, what we intend to do is play some of the footage, stop it in places, and you know, if you guys want to ask me a question about what something means or why I think that's significant, we'll try to accommodate everybody we can. Cool?
Thank you.
Any suggestions or objections or?
Everything on the flash drive is everything that you're going to present.
Actually, we're probably providing more on the flash drives than we are here, including a copy of the. I think we included a copy of the pleadings. Did we not? We can. A copy of the pleadings and that
third share, I'd say
colored
just 2
timeline.
people.
Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, just slide. Bring it. Yeah, that's fine.
And so, I guess we get started here in a second.
Where you want them, half and
Yeah,
half?
just half and half. Yep. 2 series.
Are you going to be standing there?
Yeah, unless it's, I can move.
No.
Do we move?
Are they doing something on the whiteboard? I thought they said.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, they are?
I don't know.
I'm just gonna hit record when it's time.
Mine in your shot card.
This one I did. Oh, they wrote these records about it. It's real fun. But I'll be beating now.
Sound from your face.
On the street, on the side. Oh, the park on the side. Is that parking? In the back?
There's some, yeah. Some of the dental space.
Take those gyms.
They're not gonna carry you into.
Thanks, Kim. That's probably you told me about that.
He bailed out.
No.
Tom talks when he got towed and comes to bed or something.
I just need to,
Set your foot in.
no, I need to hit record whenever it's done.
Hmm?
I can do it now.
Everybody's going?
No.
Only have one. And they got the fair. Linda did. And Tommy's walking in when I walk out. Smiley's walking in.
Okay, so guys, she's not gonna sit through this portion. It's gonna tear her up too much. So we're gonna do this, and then we'll bring her in afterward.
This is Dillard's.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is near the beginning of Dustin Dillard's body cam. We'll play a little bit of getting it established and go from there. Yes, go ahead. You can come up with sound.
No! No! Help me! Don't do it! Don't do it! I'm down! I'm down! I'm down! Please don't do it!
Pause it.
Please
You're
don't do it!
You know, early on he tells them, I'm down, you know, I'm submitting to your authority, and that gets progressively obvious.
You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
Don't hurt me!
Yeah, don't jump back. You got paramedic behind you.
Okay.
You want to twist your body out to the right.
No, it's good. I'm just worried about him.
I can't laugh! I can't! Go! Oh God, this sucked.
And since this is Dillard's body cam, you don't see the knee, but what you do see is Vasquez's legs on the left shoulder. Now, when you watch the tapes together, you'll see, particularly when you see Vasquez's tape, you will see Dillard's knee driven inside, pretty much kind of between Tony's shoulder blades. And they remain pointed and in that position for about 14 minutes, and I think it's 7 seconds. We have a chart that depicts that. But Vasquez goes back and forth periodically. Sometimes you'll see, you can see his leg is fully, his upper thigh, and those are his shoes. So he's also securing or pressing down on Tony's left shoulder.
You're gonna be all right.
Relax, Tony, relax. Tony, relax. You don't need to be squirming, man.
Stop.
I'm trying to get you help, man.
Stop.
All right?
Okay, stop. 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 Please leave me alone. Please leave.
That is 2 call sheets on this one. Hey, what's this might have come out of his pocket.
Pause. Now, in the background, you can hear Sergeant Kevin Mansell, and this is early on, and it's not terribly derogatory, but it becomes progressively flippant as time elapses.
Yeah.
You can. Do you have the? Yes. Yeah.
These are batteries.
Oh, there's. Okay. Yeah. Why don't you cut to Vasquez?
He finally said, Yacht Club in Rockwell, that's good.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just a second. Go back to this.
Hey, Tony.
Please let me go. Oh, okay.
So, shortly ago, pause it. Shortly ago, you hear Mansell off camera make a dig about the yacht club in Rockwall, and then later on, you'll hear him intentionally mispronounce Mercedes. He says, "Oh, he's got a Mercedes," and Officer Vasquez laughs belatedly, saying, "Oh, I just got that," but it's again, it's lighter, but it's not nearly as dark as things become.
You ready to go to Vasquez?
Yeah, go ahead to Vasquez and show the you can fast forward to whatever the first point is.
These guys are these guys.
So, of course, this is
Check them, they won't show you the street and everything.
positive.
Gotcha.
So these two individuals, these African American security guards, they're the ones who had actually handcuffed Tony, and Tony is already secured. And that's very significant because one of the reasons why this becomes so awful is they decide to switch Tony's handcuffs while he's restrained. And that's important for two reasons. Number one, it demonstrates that he's not a threat, because why on God's green earth would you say a person's threatening if you're going to remove his cuffs? Number two, it absolutely extends the period of time for which Tony Timpa has a knee lodged in his back and with his face in the ground.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely taking a ride.
Six here.
You got any name on them or anything?
Just Tony's the only thing we can get.
Help me! Tony!
Hey, get on the ground.
No, you're gonna kill me. You're gonna kill me. You're gonna kill me.
Tony! Relax, buddy.
Chill out. What are you gonna do? Help me.
Fortitude.
Hey, Tony. Chill out, bro. Hey, Tony, look at me.
So they're kind of engaging him, but you're going to see later on that clearly that's not what's taking place. Okay, so now Dillard's on top of him, and he's going to remain here for a
Hey,
good
Tony. What's your last name,
14.
Tony?
We're not gonna hurt you, okay? You can relax.
Ain't got nothing on me.
What'd you take today?
Hold on.
What did you take?
Yeah, so right there, in
Hey, what did you take?
right there, he told them coke, and then he keeps on asking him, and he doesn't ever get an answer after that.
Tony, what did you take today? What did you take?
Tony Timpa is the name we got.
Help me.
Hey.
This whatever don't
Okay, and so
That's all we got.
pause. Eventually, they're going to zip tie those ankles, and they will be sometimes elevated and sometimes extended. When they're elevated, zip tied, it obviously simulates the effects of a hog tie, especially when you've got a knee lodged in the back.
Tony Timpa.
Yes!
Oh, it was an actual ID? Oh, damn. I didn't see a Texas ID.
I'm down. Please, don't do it. I'm doing it.
Hey, you're okay. You're okay.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, don't jump back. Because you got a paramedic behind you.
Okay.
If you want, twist your body out to the right.
No, it's good. I'm just worried about him.
I can't now. I can't.
So, yeah, I believe they take his vitals there, but they don't give him Versed until much later. He's probably dead at that point.
Tony, just relax. Tony, relax, man. Tony, relax. You don't need to be squirming, man. We're trying to get you help, man. All right?
Okay, sir. I stop. Please leave me alone. Please. That is 2 call sheets on this one. Hey, what's this might have come out of his pocket.
Okay, this is when Mansell begins to be a little bit more flippant.
Yeah, Tony Timpa.
He finally said, yacht club in Rockball, that's supposed to be. Please let me go, please.
Hey, Tony. We're trying to help you out, man. Just relax.
Okay.
Fuck yeah. What was it? I want to do this.
What?
No. No.
I got zip cuffs in the trunk of that pit behind this Dodge, black Dodge. There's zip cuffs in the back trunk.
Forward to the next part that you'll see, that I see the circle.
Hey, I'm gonna try.
Well, okay, here we go. Now they just replace the handcuffs and they spend all this time doing that.
It's gonna be a pain in the ass swinging his hands.
Oh, please. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, you come and see us. Oh, God. Oh.
He's about to start becoming increasingly incoherent.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, sign me over here, so I can unbuckle these.
Okay.
Trying to switch out cuffs while we got them controlled a little bit.
So it takes a good 2 or 3 minutes of them switching out the cuffs.
I'm stopping, please.
Bear in mind, he's
Please, I'm stopping.
Tony Timpa's a schizophrenic who's had cocaine.
You hooked him?
You're gonna be tired tomorrow.
I got one on.
All right.
A little bit. Yeah, I'm just trying to.
There you go.
Let's get one set of cuffs off of him.
Yeah, I'm trying.
And then we'll just
He's squirming way too much.
one thing at a time. Then we'll pull his legs out and get the rest of it.
Hold on. Smaller key. Hold on.
Stop, Tony. Stop.
Please.
You're gonna have to stop tomorrow.
No!
Tony, chill out, man. Chill out.
Help me. Help me.
Did you put the foot underneath here? If you put it underneath here, you can use it. See, like right now, I got one hand controlling that because if you put it under here, I can hold it.
Ah, come on. Damn key. Damn, cuff don't want to come off. Moving way too much, man. There we go.
Green Oaks cocktail special.
Okay, they're talking about giving
Stop
him a
it.
sedative.
Tony, stop fighting me. I'm just trying to take this handcuff off.
Good workout.
What is that?
And you can hear Tony becoming increasingly exhausted.
Trying to double lock him so he doesn't cinch him on himself. Gotta love it. Y'all want to roll him? Y'all want to roll him out? We can kind of like scoot him out. We can scoot him towards. Got it?
We couldn't get the others this one to heal, but we got it.
All right.
Pause. So at about 8 minutes and 30 seconds, 36 seconds, you hear somebody say you want to roll them over, and they don't, because you can't keep somebody down, face down like that for really, they don't even really want you doing it for more than 4 or 5 minutes, much less 8. And it's beginning to become apparent to him, like, hey, you know, you want to roll him over. And his legs are already zip tied, but Dillard stays in that same position.
Go ahead, man.
Everything is
He's trying to help you out, okay? He's trying to help you out, okay? You're good. Relax.
Uh-oh. Baylor Fitness Center.
Pause.
Employee for Baylor.
So that voice off camera is Sergeant Mansell, and he begins a little bit of a narrative that you'll start hearing in a bit.
So athletic.
And he's in the fitness center. No, employee. Looks like employee. Don't he look like employee? Got a Mercury somewhere.
Yeah, he makes that flippant remark about the Mercedes. Go ahead.
I just got what you meant by that.
Pause. So we're going to show you one of the autopsy photographs that indicates how much blood hemorrhaging there was in this area, because again, Dillard's knee is there for, you know, over 14 minutes.
I need to talk. Okay. Listen.
So Tony's still moving his head at this point, but he's obviously hasn't been saying as much, and he eventually just stops moving anything at all.
Help me! Help me! Help! Help me!
All right.
Okay, get me. Okay, yo, get me. Okay. No, it's not terrible. Help me! Help me! Help me! Help me! Help me! Help me! Help me!
Tony? Anthony Timpa or something like that.
This ain't just normal crazy, man.
Pause it. He said, this ain't just normal crazy. And then they begin to say, he must be on something.
He's on something.
There's no way this is normal crazy. Pinned him down like this because they had him just sitting down. He's like rolling, like rolling color. And I was like, yeah. Damn near got kicked, so.
Okay, pause. So at 12:07, you hear that voice off the side, and that's one of the EMT saying, "What's the plan?" You know, it's like, "What are we going to do?" And they don't really have a very good explanation.
If they'll strap him to a gurney, one of y'all,
They can both run in the back. I'll drive the ambulance.
So then they start making jokes about, you know, who gets to drive the ambulance.
This is not the 11th ambulance. If it's 11th ambulance, then yes,
Anybody
you
can drive it.
Anybody can.
Anybody can drive it.
I told him it's not the 11th ambulance. So. Let me see if he's wanted for anything.
I highly doubt it. He's zip tied his feet. He's a kicker, man. Yeah, that's why I decided. No, I'm laying on him. You're gonna kill me.
Pause. So at round 12:52, you hear Dillard say under his breath, "You're gonna kill me." You know, he's like, how could that be? When in fact that was actually quite prophetic.
He was scrumming a little too much.
Pause.
Is he acknowledging anymore?
Okay, now for the next minute and a half, Tony doesn't do anything, and then the things that you've all heard about start occurring.
Oh, I thought he nodded yes onto your question.
Tony. 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 Let's make sure you're still breathing. His nose is buried.
Pause. So at around 13:24, you hear him distinctly say his nose, or not distinctly, but you hear someone say his nose is buried in the ground.
Tony.
What the fuck?
Is he asleep? He's snoring, that's what it was.
Yeah, he's asleep.
Wow. Shit, if I was squirming that much, I'd be sleeping too.
Oh, yeah, that's what I needed. Suck up more dust.
Tony.
Tony!
Hey, back to school. Wake up.
I don't want to go to school, Mom.
First day, you can't be late.
Tony.
We bought you new shoes for the first day of school. Come on.
Made breakfast, scrambled eggs, your favorite.
What, waffles?
Waffles.
Fruity Tutti Fruity waffles.
Pause.
I think he's.
So, you know, about 14 minutes and 30 seconds, you know, right after one of those guys says Rudy Tutti Fruity waffles, they finally administer the sedative Versed. But Tony's.
Oh no, he just got quiet.
All of a sudden, just bloop. The Narcan.
Oh, there he comes.
And you hear one of them say, "Here he comes," but he's not moving.
Here, the Narcan. Oh, the Green Oaks cocktail, like word. You know, if you're gonna give us like a handful of those, like,
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Be fine to go to
Get him.
IT calls. I'm all closer.
Wait for me.
Get him on the stretcher.
Yeah. Ugh. Hey, put my phone in my other pocket before. Let's turn them this way. Ugh. Oh, mother. No. Woo. All right. 1, 2, 3. Go. Shit. Hey, don't fall off now. I don't want to fall.
Is he knocked out or he's dead, is he?
So that's Dillard now inquiring, is he dead?
notes.
Oh, okay.
I think. That was a little freaky.
He didn't just die.
I don't think he did.
Is he breathing?
I love how this became a we.
Yeah.
We ain't friends.
Okay, so now they're about to enter the back of the EMT.
Hey, Domingo, find his car?
I have no idea. Hey, do you have a bag? Put it. Not just these cards and phone. And a hat. Sorry, oh damn. Sorry, still on phone.
Pause. So, right now, Sergeant Mansell is on the phone with Kim Timpa, Tony's stepmother, and he's talking to her, and soon he's going to emerge on camera, because this is Vasquez's footage, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This is his phone, right? However long the city does now. Did you see him in the street? Is that why you
Keep on.
that's why you're here?
I think we can get to the...
Dillard is the one with the ambulance.
Right, well, I think there was another... Okay, yes. Go back like 10 seconds. No, get fast forward to fast forward to about 1750 or 18 even.
He didn't just die.
Hey, do you have a bag?
A little bit further. Yeah, about 1750. So what happens
Are you
is
still on phone?
Mansell goes to talk to on the phone.
However long the city does now.
A little bit further. Okay. All right.
He looked like he's about to stumble and fall, but he lost one of his flip-flops all day. This guy's caught up with him.
Okay. Okay, thank you. What the fuck?
So, go ahead, play.
Resume momentarily.
Huh?
Oh. So, now let's go to Dillard's camera. Take him to the ambulance.
What was it?
Just another day?
Oops.
So, Mansell goes into the ambulance, and the tech tells him he's dead. And Mansell, who'd been on the phone telling Kim Timpa everything's fine, then comes out and confronts Vasquez, who then shuts off his body cam. And so the last thing you see is Mansell in the frame going, "What the fuck?" Okay.
He's not breathing?
Nope.
Oh, shit.
Fire.
Nah, he ain't breathing, bro.
We all put on some gloves when he's...
I think he went too far.
Fuck. He ain't breathing.
Yeah.
I love how this became a we. Yeah. We ain't friends.
Hey, Domingo, find his car?
I have no idea.
I'm kind of curious to see.
Hey, do you have a bag?
No, I gave him my last one. He didn't have much stuff, though. He's not breathing? Nope. Oh, shit. Fire. He ain't breathing, bro.
I'll put on some gloves when it's chest compressions.
Fuck. He ain't breathing.
So he was fighting and then just gave up.
I've got his mom on the phone, and she knows all this stuff.
He's dead.
He what?
He's dead.
Well,
You ever done CPR before? Just right there, 100 times a minute.
Pause. So for the next 5 minutes, or I think it's a little bit longer, they continue to do chest compressions on him. And, you know, of course, the EMT's already told them, look, he's dead. And Mansell, who's the supervising officer, goes off on Vasquez. Now let's go to the command hearing. So I'm sure you've all read in the coverage about two of the officers being disciplined for being discourteous. This is the audio, which is all we have, of the disciplinary hearing. I don't know who the commanding officer is, but I'm sure, as resourceful and as many of you are in this room, I'm sure some of will know by lunchtime. Go ahead, play it.
Good morning, gentlemen. Morning. Good. So, kind of give you an agenda of what's going to take place. I'll allow you guys to speak on your behalf regarding the incident that's in question. I probably will have some follow-up questions for you and or your chain of command that's sitting at the table. I'll ask you to step out for the conversations, and then I'll invite you back in to render my decision, okay? So before we look at the video, so I've seen the video, everybody here in the room. Have you guys seen the video as well too?
No.
Yeah, I've not seen it. Have you seen the video? No, sir. Yeah, okay. Would you like to see the video? Would you like to see the video?
I don't need to see it if he doesn't. Do you need to see the video?
I don't. So do you have, are we all on the same page of the reason why you're here today?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't need to see the video, right?
I don't mind it now.
Okay.
I'm good now.
Okay, all right. So at this time, I'm going to allow both of you can speak independent of each other, to give your thoughts, your feedback, your perspective regarding why you're here today. So you're not here today on the adverse conduct, correct? Correct. Okay. Are you sure?
Yes.
Yes. You're here on the sustained allegation of what's the correct word in that on that?
Number 1 and 2.
Service mock, belittle the citizen during the performance of his duties. Okay. You go, sir. Yes.
Okay. The whole time I was out there on the scene, my intentions were not to belittle Mr. Timpa or put discredit on the department. As I wrote my statement, it was merely to try to see if we can get some reaction from him, try to engage him a different way, kind of throw it off. And if he would, then we kind of know. Because the whole time, I was under the impression that he's just kind of one of those guys being over dramatic, and he's still trying to push us out in the street. So when we're kind of going through that banter and mocking and everything else.
So that's about as specious as it gets, because there's almost seems to be a direct correlation between how inflammatory the remarks get compared to how unresponsive Tony is. Tony's unresponsive, and you're hearing all this stuff about, you know, Rudy Tooty Fruity waffles, and, you know, get your shoes and get up and get out of bed. And then he begins, you know, that garbling sound that's just repulsive.
See if I can get him to kind of perk up, or so less. Okay, now I know he's listening, and we kind of give him some commands.
Okay, more absurdity, because, you know, if you've been telling somebody, Tony, hey, we're trying to help you, and, you know, that's not working, when he actually was communicating with you, nothing could possibly explain why, this gallows humor at that point in time is going to make any sense at all.
It was never my intention, like I said, just to say that stuff, just to be able to say it because, quote, I can. I had a strategy in mind. Of course, looking back at everything, it was the completely wrong way to approach it. That's pretty much it. So I kind of want to get on the table that, I'm not.
So I can't imagine why that could possibly be a strategy, but what I will tell you is this. Both officers talk about, in the looking with hindsight, that's actually a very important statement in the context of the law, because police officers are well apprised that under Graham versus Connor, that events in the field are rapidly evolving, and the judges are not supposed to superimpose their judgment using the vantage point of 20/20 hindsight. And so thus it's easy for someone to say, if I had to do it again, knowing what I know now, I would do it differently. But in the heat of the moment, I had to do what I did. And in this particular case, that's absolutely inapplicable. We're not talking about a man with a gun. We're not talking about furtive gestures. We're not talking about dark alleys where there's a need for a split-second decision. They had already had Tony subdued for roughly 14 minutes, handcuffed, released handcuffed again, zip-tied. He's completely unresponsive. He's not moving. So the idea of looking, with the vantage point of hindsight at this point in time, once again, is as specious as it gets.
In mind, of course, looking back at everything, it was the completely wrong way to approach it. That's pretty much it. So I kind of want to get on the table that, I'm not always out there just yelling at people, picking on people just because, I got a badge and I can. I did have a strategy behind it. Of course, looking back at it, it was the completely wrong way to approach it. And hindsight's 20/20. If I could do it all over again, I would completely do something completely different. So I have that.
Pause. One other thing.
I got a badge and I can.
In the context of our lawsuit, we've actually sued 5 of the officers. I've already alerted that the city will probably going to be dismissing Mr. Rivera. But Dominguez, on the other hand, has what we call bystander liability. That is, if you are present while these things are taking place, you have an affirmative duty to prevent an officer, a fellow officer, from employing excessive force. Rather than deter or do something to alter what Dillard and Vasquez are doing, Dominguez is just prolonging the restraint with his idle, sophomoric banter.
I did have a strategy behind it. Of course, looking back at it, it was the completely wrong way to approach it. And hindsight's 20/20. If I could do it all over again, I would completely do something completely different. So I have that.
So that night, we get calls all the time. You go out there trying to help. I'm not going out there to try and belittle somebody or try to mock somebody or try to bring somebody down just because they do have a uniform, a badge, and a gun. My sole intention is to actually help people and to do something positive, right? We get enough bad agenda on the news on its own. I don't need to add to it. So when we're going through this banter, part of it is just, I dealt with this guy. He was a big gentleman. It's kind of like relieving stress, and never in my mind did it cross, hey, you know what? I want to make fun of this guy. I want to belittle him. I want to mock him. I didn't. It never crossed my mind, not to this point. And yes, hindsight is 20/20. Obviously, these comments, what was said shouldn't have been said. Looking at it back, I would do it completely different, of course. I never meant to belittle him. We were trying to get him to react to something because he was on this circle of, of what his comments were, what he was saying. It was just continuous. And so trying to bring him out of that loop. maybe get some reaction different, make them understand, hey, you know, we're here trying to help you, but obviously, I mean, I'll say it, you know, if I could apologize, I would apologize to him for it, because it's incorrect looking at it back. What I said shouldn't have been said, but like I said, it wasn't to belittle him or to mock him.
So it is comforting to know that you guys realize your mistake. In the 21st century, the policing world that we're in right now, perception is reality. You guys were being recorded by your own body-worn camera. This has nothing to do with a citizen recording this. This is city equipment that recorded it. And this is what you guys said and how you said it does not represent the DPD officers of today. It really doesn't really represent law enforcement industry as a whole. I have better expectation of you. I personally believe you guys are better than that. But I still need you on the force. And so if you learn something from it.
That last remark, but I still need you on the force, I think that addresses something that everybody who's been covering policing in the city of Dallas over the last, particularly the last 6 months to a year, but certainly going back 3 or 4 years, know that this is symptomatic of a much larger problem, and that is there's been a shortage of officers, and now there's a genuine threat to the quality of law enforcement because there are just so few officers.
Most likely we can move forward from here. But I can tell you this, you coming back before me with this same type of allegation in the near future is not going to set well with me. You guys need to take this as a learning lesson, as a learning opportunity to get better and be cautious what you say you do in front of the public, whether you're in front of the public or you're not in front of the public. Who you are from a righteous standpoint, you should be that in the light and in the dark, okay? So, but again, it is comforting to understand that you guys did make a mistake, and you're completely aware of that. So, just do that. No, sir. ID, anything we missed?
No.
All right. Can you step out for me? Sir, how long have you been on the department?
17 years.
17? 6 years, okay. So I had a conversation with your chain of command sitting at the table with me. We are all in concert together. We do agree that probably the best lesson in this is your learned lessons from this incident. Unfortunately, I do disciplinary hearings at least once a week or once every 2 weeks, and I would tell you the same thing that I tell most of my young officers. At the end of the day, you can't let incidents like this deter you as though that you're not having any type of value to the organization. I personally believe that you guys are high value people. I believe that you do bring value to the organization, but unfortunately in this incident, I have to give discipline regarding this incident here. As long as you don't come back before me with the same type of allegations, I believe you guys will have a very fruitful career still ahead of you. Just because you have stuff in your jacket does not mean that you won't have opportunities afforded to you. You will have some opportunities afforded to you. And this is the way that we do business with the new chain of command that's in play right now. So for the allegation that we're talking about right now, I'm going to render written reprimand for both of you, okay? Yeah. All right, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good.
Pull up the timeline.
That's Chief Lonzo Anderson.
I'm sorry?
That's Chief Lonzo Anderson.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. So we're giving you this timeline, and it shows the overlap of when certain specific events began and ultimately where they end. Timpa's rolled onto his stomach about 1:31. Officers Dillard and Vasquez put pressure on his back. Defendant Johnson sits across the back of Timpa's thighs. And so that green line up at the top depicts the entire time during which Dillard applied continuous force to Tony's back and shoulders. And by our count, and I assume yours will confirm it within a second or two, is 14 minutes and 7 seconds. The red line below there is, as it says, at 5:20 is the time between, was measured out to be 5 minutes and 20 seconds. The time between Tony going silent and the start of CPR. And then finally, or the next is a gold line of 3 minutes and 14 seconds between the time between Tony going silent and Officer Dillard relieving Timpa's back. That is, for a full 3 minutes, Dillard is still on top of him after Tony has just gone silent. And finally, at the duration of 7 minutes and 46 seconds, the time between Timpa being handcuffed and zip tied and Dillard relieving pressure on Timpa's backs. As you can see, the Versed is administered a full 14 minutes into this process, deep, during the period of time where Dillard has been lodging his knee into Tony's back. So, far too little, far too late. I'll take your questions.
What culpability does the Dallas Fire Department have in all of this? Why didn't they step in sooner?
So one thing, there's an ambiguity, I think, that happens in certain scenes where there's just an absolute loss of control by the parties, the first responders, because in cases, particularly where there's a weapon involved, you know, the EMTs are not going to sit down and, you know, try to work on somebody who could cut them or shoot them or do something like this. And so as a result, EMTs absolutely have a tendency to be far too deferential to the police when it comes to administering, you know, stepping in and administering first aid. Ultimately, the police, as the department well recognizes, have the duty not to have them in a prolonged restraint. And that's why, as you all will recall, they were indicted in the first place. They were indicted for violating one of the general orders concerning prolonged restraint. And the fire department, you know, had gotten in there and had taken his vitals, and he seemed to be fine then, but certainly they could have been more proactive.
Your own medical examiner, though, wasn't it ruled that it was excited delirium?
No, that's not my medical examiner, for one thing, and excited delirium is not supported by science. That is absolutely fallacious. We actually have a different medical examiner. I'm not sure if you're talking about Dr. Pirwani, but no, I never retained Dr. Pirwani, and that's not somebody that I just don't accept that premise. The medical examiner that we have retained, I anticipate that she is going to state that this was an actual homicide, and that just like this medical examiner did, that they've all determined it was a homicide, and that she will be looking at not merely the restraint, but also the lodging of the nose into the ground, and the placement of the knee on the back. I don't know if we have the photographs of the autopsy. So one thing that we absolutely take issue with regarding the autopsy is, as I was saying, was the hemorrhaging in the blood. Oh, it's a PDF. Okay. Maybe what we could do is have somebody print it, and if necessary, if we can't get it up, we'll show it to you. But it's that pooling of blood I described earlier. There was, you know, probably an area of about this big, you know, where there is this large source of blood in Tony's upper back. I don't know if that completely answered your question.
The attorney yesterday, I talked to Cruzetto, and he said the reason that the charges were not brought against these, dropped, is because 4 different medical examiners have looked at this case and said that these officers did A, that they're criminal, and B, that the cause of death does not support that these officers killed him.
So with respect to criminality, one thing that you have to be very mindful of, I'm a former prosecutor. I was an ADA for 4 years. And what the public frequently just struggles with, as do district attorneys, is how is it that in the same incident or in a blink of an eye can somebody become either a hero or a villain in one single moment, meriting incarceration. And between those two extremes, there's a great deal of difference, and civil liability is certainly one of them. It's kind of like in sporting events, right? Sometimes we see horrific late hits, and you don't see somebody hauled off to jail for something like that, but they get fined or they get thrown out of a game or something to that effect. And so, what was fascinating about that, of course, is and excessive force cases frequently bring that to the fore in terms of, well, is this criminal? Is it not criminal? Because it's very easy to associate it with criminality because you're talking about intentional conduct, not negligent conduct in many instances, but intentional conduct. They're pressing them down or somebody's shooting somebody, and those are intentional acts. And so as a result, it's very easy to assume, particularly if you're a family member or the like, that this is the act of malice. When in fact, when you're talking about excessive force in the constitutional context, it is an objective standard. The culpable mental state of the actor is not applicable. It's not essential. And so when we're talking about criminality versus civil liability, it's far more important what's in the actor's mind for John Crusoe than it is for Geoff Henley. Second, in terms of causation, we absolutely disagree with that because the causation is very clear in terms of how early it happens, and I'm very confident, having spoken to multiple pathologists regarding this, that we're very comfortable with our position there. Bear in mind, again, I take you back to the timeline. There were several lines of demarcation where they absolutely did not do what they were supposed to do. Now, keep in mind, the district attorney has got to prove guilt, criminal guilt, beyond reasonable doubt, and that is a much higher standard of proof than what we have to contend with in the civil context. One thing, of course, is these men were indicted by a grand jury, and then subsequent to that, the district attorney's office decided, look, we don't feel comfortable moving forward in this instance. Does that answer your question? All right.
How much of this, in your opinion, is a judgment issue with the officers involved versus maybe the way that they're trained?
Well, I mean, one thing about training, right? I mean, everybody in any kind of discipline, whatever it is, probably, we have continuing education, right? Officers receive it. You certainly receive it in, I'm certain, seminars. And like anything else, right, it's not just that you learn something once, but that you're constantly having it preached to you, right? Because, you ask most officers, oh, well, no, you're not supposed to have somebody, restrained, for a prolonged period of time. And so as a result, when you've got a supervising officer there at the scene, it's essential that you're constantly reminding them of the need to, hey, we can't keep him down like this, because for quite some time it's more than apparent. It doesn't even dawn on him or dawn on them that he's dying. And so if I tell you one thing one time, are you really going to remember it? Maybe, maybe not. But if I'm constantly reinforcing a particular message, whatever the message is, whether it's about how you dress or how you drive or how you treat a man in mental crisis, it's important that message is reinforced continuously.
So how do you feel about these officers after thoroughly watching this?
Well, it's
being able to be back on the street, possibly in another situation.
Well, it's awful, and the city is on notice of this, and I woe to the person who gets in their custody.
Those officers have received death threats, and so have the officers across citywide because of this case. Any comment on that?
That's horrific. I don't want to have any police officer threatened. There are ways to redress losses, crimes in our country. We don't, just like we don't want officers employing excessive force, we absolutely don't want retaliation against cops. I mean, you know, I've employed police officers and off-duty police officers to police my properties. There's no way that I would want any kind of officer to suffer reprisal. And I will tell your audience, like I think I told the gentleman from your station yesterday, make no mistake, we do not want any retaliation against any of these officers. We don't want them to suffer any death threats. We don't want them to suffer poison pen letters. You know, if you have criticism of them, then, you know, choose the form and put your name to it. Stand behind it and don't, you know, send trash in a mailbox or throw a brick through a window.
Remind us, what are the next steps for the civil lawsuit?
So we are now deep in it because, you know, bear in mind, this office has filed 2 separate lawsuits with respect to this case. Like Ms. Aspinwall from the Dallas Morning News, who heroically pursued the department, maybe not heroically, but diligently, and seeking them out because she, like us, she had sent her own FOIA requests, and like us, we got we got the cold hand or whatever it was, and then we ended up filing a lawsuit, which is called the writ of mandamus, because the city of Dallas had blown their deadlines. And this happened, I guess, 3 years ago. And contemporaneous with that, we then filed our civil lawsuit. And so our excessive force lawsuit has been pending now for the better part of 3 years. Dustin Dillard is I think he was in the Air Force. He was deployed to Afghanistan. Our lawsuit got stayed for approximately a year. And then almost immediately upon his return, they were indicted, and our lawsuit gets stayed again. So the Timpas, both husband or Mr. Joe Timpa and my client, Vicky Timpa, and then Tony's son, they have been waiting a long time already just to get this thing off the ground. Why we're all here today, of course, is because with the dismissal of the criminal case, there was no basis whatsoever to continue to keep the protective order on the body cam and all of the information we have here. We have a trial date set next year. I believe it is in the I believe it's in the late summer, early autumn. Before that, the City of Dallas, on behalf of the City Attorney's Office, on behalf of the officers, will be filing, as is customary in these cases, a motion for summary judgment based upon qualified immunity, where they are going to assert that the officers either didn't violate the constitutional rights of Tony Timpa, or in the event that they did violate his constitutional rights, that these were subject to the defense of qualified immunity. And that motion will probably be filed sometime in, I believe it's January or February.
And the civil suit, just so that I'm clear, is against Dustin Dillard, Danny Vasquez,
and Kevin Mansell, and right now Dominguez and Officer Rivera. As I've indicated to my counterpart, we intend to dismiss the action against Mr. Rivera because he is completely off the premises. He's the one who's driving around looking for Tony's car, and I told Ms. Wilson this probably months ago. It just you know, we're now kind of putting everything together. But Officer Dominguez has bystander liability. So
it's going to be against 4 officers.
Yes.
A lot of times in these situations, the police department has a tendency to either falsify reports or grossly understate exactly what happened. Did you find any evidence of that, or is that something you have access to?
So I have to tell you, I have not taken a side-by-side comparison of their written statements compared to what's in the body cam footage. It hasn't been necessary, but as these depositions, which are coming forward in the next few weeks, take place, my office as well as Mr. Timpa's lawyers will be looking at that closely to ascertain exactly what you're talking about, because yes, things get understated, euphemisms, clinical sterile jargon that absolutely doesn't reflect the reality, and so I can't say that I've identified anything specifically right now, but that's typically the case. We've got Ms. Timpa in the back. We can bring her out if you have any, unless you have any additional questions for me. We can have her. She didn't want to hear any more footage, at least not today. But we can do that if you like.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of me at present? Okay. Well, we'll get Ms. Timpa out here and. Yes.
That will go to trial late summer, fall.
Yes, next year in federal court.
It hasn't gotten a rejection.
No. On the issue that you've addressed, largely on causation and you know, did they breach any sort of duties? And if a judge determines that, if Judge Godbee determines that there's a quote fact issue, then the case will, their motion will be denied, and we will either proceed to trial, or because they're cops, because they're officers, they will, if the court rules in our favor, they actually will have, they will be entitled to what's called an interlocutory appeal. Those of you in the media, all of you, are probably familiar with that because there's a similar procedure with respect to First Amendment defamation claims.
I got you to look right here. Thank you.
What's Officer Dominguez's first name?
You know, if I had a copy of the pleadings, I can.
Raymond.
It's Raymond. Yeah. All right. Hey, Vicky. Yeah, Mark.
Am I supposed to go with you? Oh, all the way to
Yeah, just have a seat. We'll get you down here right
this
here.
part over here. All right.
Okay.
Who are all these people? Huh? They look kind of familiar.
Some of them are probably familiar.
Oh, there's
Some,
Brian.
yeah.
And oh, that's Rebecca. She's a sweet girl. I've seen you too. And Carrie.
Okay. Do you want to?
Yo, we'll shake and move over.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Where do you work, darling?
NBC 5.
Oh, Channel 5. Oh, that's a nice place.
You want to scoot in a little bit more to the center so we can get. There you go.
Okay.
Well, Vicki, I know this has been a really hard time for you, and then it took 3 years to kind of get this video. I know it's hard to watch.
Well, in correction, we've actually had the video. We've had the video since 2000 and late 2016, and even Mr. Timpa's lawyers weren't able to get it because of the confidential, the protective order. But so we've actually known this story for quite some time. I guess me and Carrie over here and Brian too. Well, they've been fighting about this for quite some time, but it's only with the release of it has it, have we all known about it.
Yeah, now that we're all being able to see it, what is your kind of reaction to the fact that it's finally getting out there, that everybody can see what really happened through the eyes of the body cam?
Well, darling, I have seen it every day of my life since I saw it the first time. And so that's why I don't get to sleep anymore. Well, I was actually just beginning to go back to sleep. But then, but it's real hard to hear my son scream, "Help me," and cry. And they laugh at him, and they torture him, and they kill him, and they have fun doing it, and they keep doing it even when he's not breathing, and then they're still making jokes. Because, see, it was fun for them. They were all in a circle having fun, laughing. They all had fun. It's like, okay, we get this 911 call. This guy needs help. Let's go have fun with him. Let's torture him and kill him. And we won't use a bullet. We'll use our hands. And that's the help my son got. My son helped everyone. Everybody got help from my son. He was so positive. He was so happy. He was full of life. That boy was going places. But they had to have a party on the side of the road with my baby and stuffed him under a park bench and tied him up like an animal and drove his face into the ground. When I went to the morgue, his nose and his mouth were full of grass. How can you breathe grass? You can't. You're face down. It's squishing your nose. You can't even get the air in there. And then waited 10 or so minutes after they said he was dead to start CPR, and the people that did it were the new guys that just got there. It wasn't the paramedics and the police that were there all for an hour. It was the new paramedics, the big guys, asking what happened, and they started CPR because the other guy, he was sitting there talking about putting on gloves. The one that gave him the injection, a heavy sedative that you use for anesthesia for surgery. Now you tell me how we are paying taxpayer dollars to be murdered and tortured. Why? Why do we pay taxes for that? Why? Why do we have 911 when the paramedics and the police want to torture people like they did my son? Why? Why? I want to know why we're paying taxes for that. Why? Can you tell me? Can you tell me why? Why? Why?
Well, obviously, in March, when they dismissed the criminal charges, I can only imagine how hard that was to hear. What do you hope happens now to these officers through a civil suit? What do you guys hope?
If you've noticed, and I hope everybody notices, it's all lip service. The DA office only prosecutes non-Dallas cops, except the one. But they didn't even want to fire that woman. They killed that man in his apartment. But they finally did. Maybe they can fire the cops that killed my son and laugh for an hour. Where his ankles and his wrist, and that cop had his knee in the middle of his back rocking just to make sure he kills them. How can anybody be so cruel? You know, I would like to know, do those cops have animals? Were they mean to their pets when they were children? They didn't test them for drugs. They didn't test the police for drugs. They didn't do a psychological test on anybody. Who are we hiring? I heard everybody left, 1,000 people, after my son was murdered, because you see, they all knew. I was told by Sergeant Ibarra that he was walking down the street and he saw a light in a car. The car door was open. He walked up, and there was a body on the ground. It was my son, he said. I tried to help him, but it was too late. He was too traumatized. He died on the way to the hospital. Then Detective Arredondo, who is also on Facebook, by the way, it's called Plain View, and there's 70 Dallas policemen that talk about torturing and killing our citizens. 70 have been identified. It's been on the news.
I'm familiar.
Nothing happened to them. Brian has a whole list of cops that have been on administrative leave for months, years. Why are we paying taxpayer dollars for those people? Anyway, as I was saying, they left. Why? Because they're good cops. There are good cops. There are good paramedics. They got short of help too. Why? I'm quite sure they went into that room. They apparently, who's here from Channel 8? Thank you, Rebecca. Channel 8 did a story about a detective room where there were boxes up to the ceiling. And anybody can walk in there and change the report. They can dismiss it, they can edit it, and they can change it. Guess what? Nothing was done about that either. Because Dallas police rule this place. So all of you, be very afraid. I was scared coming here today because it's in Dallas. I don't drive to Dallas. I don't go to Dallas. I would never live in Dallas. They will hunt you down.
Next question. Way back in the back.
Mrs. Timpa, did you want the public to be able to see this body camera video? I know it's hard for you to see, but did you want it released?
Yes, I've been trying to get it released since I first saw it because it is my own private nightmare. Because they denied it. And then the next Arredondo detective lady told me that Tony called the police because someone was chasing him and he was afraid. And when they got there, Tony got in the ambulance, waved to the cops, and thanked them and smiled. But he died on the way to the hospital. That was the second lie. And see, all this time, I haven't seen the body camera yet. So I'm hearing a news story, absorbing, he's on the ground, my baby's dying on the ground. Then my baby's getting chased by someone. He gets on an ambulance, but then he dies on the way. And then I hear the third story. And this is just going on and on while the police chief refuses to talk to me, the fire chief refuses to talk to me, the DA refuses to talk to me. Nobody will talk to me, so I'm like, hey, what's happening? Carrie knew what was happening because Carrie got this piece of paper called CID, or C, custody in death. Yeah, CID. There were two pieces of paper. The one they sent to Ken Paxton that said he cooperated, he did not fight him, he was perfectly good. And then there was another one after they got their tire stories together and they wrote how horrible my son was, thrashing, fighting, whatever. Carrie has both of them. Carrie knew there was something wrong here. Well, how can they do that? Say two different things. What's going on?
She's talking about the custodial death report. Do you all have copies of that? I know Carrie does, and Brian, Rebecca. We can add that to the flash drives. It was submitted early on, and you know, like she said, I think Carrie and I probably talked about that for about 2 or 3 years. And in it, the officer, Sergeant Merritt, specifically states that there was no resisting, no threats, of course unarmed, and this custodial death report, you know, is a state-mandated report that law enforcement agencies have to file whenever there's a death that occurs when a person is in their custody.
When was it that she first saw the video, just so I'm clear?
That would have been within a couple of weeks of our receiving it, and then I would have to go back and look.
2016? Or?
It would have been 2016 or early 2017. and I can if you want, I can get the date. But I mean,
Nobody-
I would know the exact date, but I can tell you when we received these items, and Ms. And I think there was probably a broadcast that occurred, or broadcast that occurred, because what happened, as some of you folks may recall, once I had the body cam footage, I went back and amended our pleadings to reflect the times depicted in the footage on the Vasquez and Dillard body cams. So at or near that time, I know I showed it to Vicky.
Did you show him how the supervisor Manziel was laughing and laughing and laughing, and
Yes.
egging him on, and the lady detective who is leading the case, Angela Arredondo, she's in Plainview. She's also on a YouTube video. She's also on another blog where this little child was at some kind of swim party, and a policeman from another place put her in the ground. She wrote that she'd be the first to put the face in the ground. She was the one over the case. The one that kept telling me lies. She had a cell phone. She called everybody on there. That's how she got my number. But yet then she tells Tony's father, the phone doesn't work. I wasn't able to use it. She handed it back. She drove all the way to Rockwall to give it to him. Said she could never open it. Well, you told me that's how she got it all. So I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. See all the lies. They just get away with so much, they just don't even care about all the stories they tell. But what I'm saying is, the DA knows it. Castro, deputy chief, knows it because he told me, he asked her if that were true. She said yes. She put a UBS. It's in her computer at the Dallas police station. She's the detective still. So they have all this. The DA said he wasn't interested in anything like that. Dismissed. Dismissed. Because what I was saying, they'll put the other police on the trial, but not if you're in Dallas.
Next question. Any additional questions?
I want that cell phone. I want my son's pictures. Why can't I have it? All the pictures are on there. All the videos with my grandson playing all kinds of sports with my son. Why can't I have that? That's over with. Why can't I have it? It's on Detective Arredondo's computer at the Dallas Police Department. Why can't I have that? Can y'all tell me why? Can I have that? It's my son's. But she wiped the phone clean, so it's not on the phone. When you suck it out with a UBS port, it wipes it clean. But since she has it on her computer, can I have my pictures? Why is it so hard to get anything? But anyway, what I was telling you, when you turn on the news, you see this, the Dallas police found a body in this creek or that road and all this stuff. Well, that's what they told me. They found a body. How many people do they tell they found a body? How many other mothers are out there that don't know what happened to their child? How many stories do they tell all the mothers that they found a body? That they were happy and waved to the cops and thanked them? They were in a bar and had a heart attack. What? What are all these things? What? Oh, okay. Well, how many people are there? How many more will there be? The best thing that can happen to my son right now is for these policemen to lose their badge in every jurisdiction in the United States of America and let these other cops that are good, wonderful, decent people do their job because they're there. But get the rotten apples out of the barrel. And the same with the paramedics. You watch that. Anybody that stands there and talks and carries on and never does CPR, not even for a second? I've been a nurse since 1977. I worked in ICU, ER, everywhere. Not one patient ever died on me. And I took care of a lot of cops. I worked with cops. They stayed with us in the ER. They even told me why they didn't put a knee in the middle of someone's back. We had that conversation years ago. Years and years ago. But anyway, I'm thanking you for telling Tony's story. And I hope that somebody comes in and cleans Dallas up. But until then, be very careful. I've had 4 death threats. They probably want me to go away. But guess what? I'm still here. And Lynn Ann, sweet lady in the back, she came to my house, and I'm sorry, I get upset like this. I probably scared Lynn Ann. I don't mean to yell. I just get so emotional. When you carry a baby in your belly for 9 months and you watch them take their first steps and call you mama, and even when they're grown, they come over every week and say, Mom, you got any cobwebs for me to get down? Are there any light bulbs I need to change? Let's go have a cup of coffee, Mom. I'll go make it. You sit down. Think positive, Mom. You got to think positive. He helps everyone. He gives everybody everything. I don't know. And I had him for a good 32 years, but I tell you what, he would have done a lot of good for people here. My son was very successful. He had 2 wonderful jobs. But I'm sure everybody says the same thing about their child that was murdered, and they say they found a body. Mothers and fathers, beware. Do not believe anything you hear from those people at the Dallas Detective DPD. Do your own investigation, like I did when the chaplain at the morgue tipped me off. She's tired of seeing them bring him in like that. She's tired of it. That's where they take you and they say they pronounced you in the Parkland, but they were dead long before they got to Parkland. Not all of them, but I'm just tired of turning on the television and hearing how the Dallas police found a body, because that's what they told me. And I pray for the mothers and fathers that had to hear that, because they may not know what happened to their kid ever. Pray for all the mothers and all the fathers and the brothers and the sisters and all the children that don't have them anymore. And there's going to be an honor ceremony for my baby tonight at 7 o'clock in front of the Dallas police station. They're going to honor my child. And last night about 3:30 in the morning, it said there was 534 people coming. I don't know how many people are coming, but I'm going to be there because my son is a beautiful baby, a good boy. Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? Anything else?
Who's holding that?
I'd heard something about something yesterday, but I can't say that I.
It's called Urban Network.
Yeah, I personally don't know anything about it, but
They
I'm
have
certainly going to look.
it's an orange-red sign on Facebook, and I was invited, and it's called hashtag Tony Timpa, or something like that. It popped up on my Facebook page. Hashtag Tony Timpa. Oh, Stand Up Dallas. Stand up for Tony Timpa or something. I don't remember. It's kind of long. But it's called Network, Urban Network.
Any other questions? We thank you so much for coming out. We thank you so much for telling Tony's story. And there'll be more to come.
And thank you for finally believing me. Because Carrie was the only one that believed me from day one.